The night was cruel, colder than anyone in the valley could remember. The sky was hidden behind heavy black clouds, and the storm screamed like a beast across the land. Snow and ice cut through the air, striking everything with a sharp sting. The ground was already buried in white, and the wind showed no mercy. In the middle of that storm, a small alien child stumbled across the frozen path. The child's skin was pale with frost, and their small hands clutched at the air as if begging someone, anyone, to help. Tears rolled down their cheeks, but in the freezing air, those tears almost turned to ice before they could fall. The child's sobs were lost in the roar of the storm, yet they kept crying, their voice weak. "Mother, mother." The village nearby had shut its doors tight, families huddled by their fires, pretending not to hear the faint cries outside. They were afraid of the storm, and they were afraid of strangers. In such a night, no one wanted to risk their own life for another. But not everyone was blind to the suffering. A human traveler moved carefully through the storm. His cloak was heavy with snow, his breath coming out in white clouds. He had no reason to be there, no reason to walk in such deadly cold. But he had been caught on the road when the storm rose. Now, pushing against the wind, he thought only of finding shelter before his strength failed. Then he heard it. At first, it sounded like the wind itself. A broken whisper carried through the air, but when he stopped, he heard it again. A cry, faint and desperate. His heart tightened. He could have kept walking, told himself it was just the storm playing tricks, but the sound was too real, too full of pain. He turned his head, straining his ears. The cry came again. "Mother, where are you?" The human pushed forward, each step heavy as his boots sank into the snow. His eyes stung from the cold, but he narrowed them, searching through the blur of white, and then he saw it, a small figure curled near the broken remains of a fallen tree. The child was trembling violently, their body nearly covered in snow. The human rushed forward, kneeling beside the little one. He brushed the snow from the child's face and gasped. The alien child's lips were blue, their eyes wide with terror. "Easy, easy now," the human whispered, his voice soft but firm. He pulled the child into his arms, wrapping his cloak around their small frame. The child clung to him weakly, their voice barely a whisper. "Mother, please, she's still out there." The human's heart sank. This was not just one life to save. There was another still trapped somewhere in the storm. He looked at the child, at their frozen tears, and he knew what choice stood before him. He could leave the child in some shelter and save himself, or he could risk everything to search for the mother. For now, he tightened his grip on the small body, lifting the child to his chest. He had to find a place to keep them alive through the storm. He looked around, the blizzard swirling so thick he could barely see. His mind raced. Every second in this storm was deadly. The night howled louder. But deep in that storm, a promise began to form inside the human's heart. He would not let the child's tears freeze. He would not leave them alone in the storm. The ice storm raged on, but now it was not just a battle for survival. It was the beginning of something greater, something that would test the limits of one human's courage. The storm did not rest. The wind screamed as if the sky itself was tearing apart. The human held the alien child close against his chest, but the weight of fear pressed heavier than the snow on his shoulders. The child was shivering so badly he could feel their tiny bones trembling through the fabric of his cloak. Every breath the child took was short, weak, and filled with pain. He stumbled through the white blur, searching for any sign of shelter. His eyes burned from the ice, and his beard had turned stiff with frost. Still, he pressed on. His boots sank into snow with every step, dragging him down. Yet each time he thought about stopping, the faint voice of the child whispered against his chest. "Don't leave, Mother. She's waiting." The human's heart twisted. He had never seen such desperation, not even in the wars he had fought long ago. This was not just a child fighting the storm. This was a child fighting the cruel silence of being abandoned. He looked around and spotted a shadow against the snow, a broken hut half buried beneath a drift. He pushed toward it, his muscles aching. At last he forced the door open, the old wood groaning against the storm. Inside it was dark and cold, but at least the wind was shut out. He laid the child gently on the floor, brushing the snow from their hair. The child's eyes blinked slowly open, wide and glassy. She's still out there, they whispered. My mother, she couldn't move. I ran, but I couldn't bring her. The words cracked like glass in the cold air. The human crouched beside them, his hands tightening into fists. He knew the truth. The mother was likely half buried in the storm by now. If he waited too long, there would be nothing left to save. But if he left the child here alone, they might not survive either. He tore a strip from his own cloak and wrapped it around the child like a blanket. Then he crouched low, speaking slowly so the words would not be lost in the child's fear. Listen, I will find your mother, but you must stay here. Stay by the wall, keep this cloak around you, and no matter how loud the storm becomes, do not leave. Do you understand? The child blinked, their lips trembling. Will you come back? The human looked into those eyes that carried a mixture of alien strangeness and a child's pure fear. I will come back, he said, his voice firm. I swear it, I will bring her to you. He placed a hand gently on the child's head, feeling how cold it was even beneath their hair. That touch sealed his promise. When he stood, the wind howled as he opened the door again. The storm struck him like a wall, trying to push him back inside. But he gritted his teeth and stepped forward. His boots sank into the snow once more, and the world outside swallowed him. He walked where the child's faint trail had led. His eyes searched the frozen land, half blinded by whirling flakes. The storm screamed in his ears, but every time it grew too loud, he heard again the child's desperate voice. Don't leave, mother. His body ached. His lungs burned with cold air. His hands had gone numb, yet he pressed on. The snow covered almost everything, but he forced himself to see, to search for the smallest sign of another soul. Behind him, in the small hut, the child pressed their back against the wall, clutching the human's torn cloak. They whispered again into the darkness, not sure if anyone could hear. Please, find her. Please. And in the storm, the human walked deeper into death's mouth, carrying not only his own life but the fragile hope of a child who had trusted him. The snow roared louder, the night darker, but the search had only begun. The storm showed no mercy. The sky was black, the snow endless, and the wind roared like a living creature. The human pushed forward, his shoulders hunched, his breath heavy, his cloak whipped in the storm, but his eyes never stopped searching. Every step dragged him deeper into the ice, yet he refused to turn back. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The trail left by the alien child was almost gone, swallowed by snow. Sometimes he thought he saw shapes in the distance, maybe the mother, maybe just shadows of the storm. He stumbled, fell into the snow, and rose again. His legs screamed with pain, but his heart screamed louder, reminding him of the child waiting. At last, through the swirling white, he spotted something, an outline, small and broken. He forced himself closer, his boots crunching in the ice. And then he saw her, the alien mother, half buried beneath branches and snow, her skin pale, her body stiff. Her chest moved faintly, but the breath was shallow. She was alive, but only just. The human dropped to his knees, his hands tearing at the ice. He pulled away branches, ignoring how the frost bit into his skin. Stay with me, he muttered, though she could not hear him. Her eyes fluttered weakly open, strange alien eyes filled with pain. She tried to speak, but only a broken gasp left her lips. I have you, he whispered, his voice firm. I will not leave you here. But the storm was growing stronger. The wind pushed against him, almost throwing him back. He knew he could not carry her far in this weather. Not yet, not with the child waiting in the ruined hut. His eyes darted around, searching desperately. And there, just beyond a broken ridge, he saw a shadow, a collapsed building, old and covered in ice. It was a shelter, not safe, not warm, but better than dying here in the open. He wrapped his arms around the alien mother, straining as he pulled her free of the snow. Her body was heavier than he expected, but he forced himself to rise, step by step, dragging her weight toward the ruin. The storm screamed at him, tearing at his strength, but he gritted his teeth. By the time he reached the shelter, his muscles burned and his lungs ached as if they were filled with fire. He kicked open what remained of the doorway, dragging her inside. The walls leaned dangerously, half broken, but at least the wind was weaker there. Snowflakes still drifted through cracks, cold air biting every corner. Yet this ruin was their only chance. He lowered her carefully onto the icy ground. Her body trembled, her breath shallow, her lips formed words, barely audible. My Child. The human nodded, crouching beside her. Alive, safe, waiting for you, he said. His voice was steady, but deep inside he feared both mother and child could still be lost if he failed. He searched the ruin quickly, his fingers numb. In the corner he found broken wood, shards of old furniture. He tore it apart, stacking the pieces together. His hands shook as he struck flint, again and again. At last, a spark caught, then flame, small, weak, but alive. He fed the fire carefully, protecting it with his hands. The flames flickered, warming the frozen air just enough to keep her alive. The alien mother's eyes blinked open wider now, catching the glow. She whispered again, "You came." The human looked at her, his face pale with cold but steady with resolve. "Yes," he said softly, "and I will not leave until you are safe." The firelight flickered across the cracked walls, shadows dancing like spirits in the ruin. Outside, the storm still howled, but inside, a fragile hope burned. The human leaned back against the wall, exhaustion pulling at his body. But he kept his eyes on the alien mother, knowing she was not safe yet. He thought of the child waiting alone in the other hut, clutching his torn cloak, praying for their mother to return. He had promised to reunite them, and promises to him were unbreakable. The storm outside was only growing worse, but in that ice-covered shelter, 3 lives were now tied together, and the true struggle was only just beginning. The storm screamed like a monster that would never tire. Ice stung the skin, snow blinded the eyes, and the wind carried the sound of sorrow through the endless white. The human leaned against the wall of the broken shelter, his chest heaving. He had dragged the alien mother from death's grip, but the fight was not over. Her body lay close to the fire, barely alive, her breaths shallow. She stirred, whispering through chattering teeth, "My child." Her voice cracked, filled with fear more than pain. Her eyes, weak but desperate, searched the darkness as if she expected to see her little one appear through the storm. The human nodded, steadying his voice even though his heart carried the weight of both lives. "Your child is alive, waiting. I swore I would bring you back to them, and I will." His words gave her strength, but they also deepened his burden. For now, he carried not only his promise but their fragile hope. He fed the fire with the last of the broken wood, sparks dancing in the icy air. Then he rose, adjusting the cloak tightly around his shoulders. He looked at her once more. "Stay awake if you can. The fire will fight the cold. I will return with your child." Her hand lifted weakly, trembling, as if trying to hold him back, but he was already stepping into the blizzard again. The storm swallowed him whole. The cold hit him like knives, forcing him to bow his head low. The snow beneath his boots was thick, heavy, and the wind howled with fury. He followed the faint trail he had left earlier, every step harder than the last. The child's small footprints were already fading, buried beneath fresh snow. He bent down once, brushing away ice, revealing the faint marks. He forced himself forward, focusing only on one thought: do not fail them. The world around him blurred into white silence, but inside his mind he heard the child's weak voice again. "Don't leave mother." That voice kept him walking when his body screamed to fall. He stumbled, falling to his knees. The snow burned his skin even through his clothes. His fingers were numb, his breath felt heavy, like stone in his chest. For a moment, he thought of stopping, of letting the storm take him, but then he imagined the child alone in the hut, clutching his torn cloak, eyes filled with fear and hope. He clenched his jaw, forcing himself back onto his feet. At last, the broken hut came into sight through the storm, half covered in ice. He pushed the door open and rushed inside. The child was curled in the corner, clutching the strip of cloak he had left. Their eyes widened the moment they saw him. "You came back," the child whispered, their voice hoarse. The human knelt, pulling the child close. "I promised, didn't I? Your mother is alive, but she's weak. She needs you." The child's tears fell again, warm against his frozen cloak. They clung to him as if afraid he would vanish again. "Take me to her, please." He nodded, lifting the child into his arms. This time, every step would be harder, for the storm had only grown stronger, but now he carried something more precious than his own life. He left the hut behind, the wind slamming the door shut. Snowflakes whipped across his face, blinding him. The child buried their face in his chest, whispering, "She'll be waiting. She'll be waiting." The human forced his way back through the frozen wasteland, the fire in his heart burning brighter than the storm's rage. Behind him lay the faint trail of tears the child had left when they had first run for help. Ahead of him, the mother waited, and between them all lay death's cold hand, but he was human and he would not let go. The storm raged, the trail nearly gone, yet his steps pressed forward, step after step, each one carving defiance into the snow. He had chosen this fight, and he would see it through. And so, in the heart of the storm, carrying a child's hope against the weight of the world, he followed the trail of tears back to the shelter of fire and fragile life. The storm had no pity. The human pushed forward, his cloak heavy with snow, the alien child pressed close to his chest. Every step was a battle. The child shivered violently, whispering over and over, "Mother, hold on, we're coming." Those words cut through the storm, louder than the wind. Finally, through the white curtain of snow, the broken shelter came into sight again. The human staggered inside, nearly falling as he lowered the child onto the icy ground. The fire he had left burned weakly, its glow faint but alive, and beside it lay the alien mother, her skin pale and marked with frost, her breath shallow, her body unmoving. The child's eyes widened in horror. "Mother!" they cried, rushing forward on trembling legs. They clutched her hand, their small fingers shaking as they tried to warm her frozen skin. Tears slid down their cheeks. "Please wake up. Please, don't leave me." The human knelt beside them, his chest tight. He placed his hand over the mother's heart. There was still a beat, weak but steady. She was not gone yet, but the storm had left its mark. Her body was like a prisoner of the ice, stiff and locked. Every breath was a fight she was losing. He looked at the child, who was sobbing against her arm, and then back at the mother. His jaw tightened. He had carried soldiers bleeding from battlefields. But this was different. This was a fight not against blades or bullets, but against the cold that wanted to steal life itself. "Listen," he said firmly, turning the child's tear-streaked face toward him. "She's still alive, but she needs more warmth, more fire, and she needs us not to give up. Do you understand?" The child nodded weakly, their face wet with frozen tears. They pressed their small body closer to their mother, trying to share their own warmth. "She can't die," they whispered. "She can't." The human rose quickly, his eyes searching the ruin. He tore apart more of the broken walls, snapping wood with numb hands, splinters cutting his skin. He threw the pieces into the fire until it roared higher, the flames crackling with fierce life. Then he pulled off his outer cloak, ignoring the bite of cold instantly attacking his body, and wrapped it tightly around the mother, covering her shivering form. His own skin burned with frost, but he did not care. For hours he and the child fought against the storm inside that shelter, feeding the fire, rubbing her hands, calling her name. Each time her chest rose faintly with a breath, it was a victory. Each time it slowed, terror gripped their hearts. At one point, her eyes fluttered half open, unfocused. Her lips moved slowly, whispering broken words. "Cold. So cold." The child pressed their face against her, crying, "I'm here, Mother. Please don't leave me. Please." The human leaned closer, his voice strong even as his body shook. "You are not alone. I will not let the ice take you, I swear it." Outside, the storm hammered the walls, snow blowing in through the cracks, but inside, three souls clung together against the dark, time-lost meaning. The human's fingers bled from breaking wood, his shoulders ached from carrying weight, but he refused to stop. The child, though small and weak, refused to rest. Their tiny hands never left their mother's, as if their touch alone could hold her here. Slowly, the frost began to fade from her skin. Her breaths grew a little stronger, her trembling less violent. Chains of ice that had trapped her seemed to loosen. The human finally sank back against the wall, his body nearly broken, yet he allowed himself a small, tired smile. "She's fighting," he said softly. "She's not giving up." The child looked up at him with wide, tearful eyes, then buried their face against their mother's chest, whispering, "We'll stay with you, always." The storm outside still howled, but in that fragile shelter, warmth had returned. The alien mother was still trapped in chains of ice, but now she was not fighting alone, and the human knew. This night was not just about survival anymore. It was about keeping a promise stronger than the storm itself. The storm had not eased. It howled like a beast outside the broken walls, shaking the ruin as though it wanted to rip even this fragile shelter apart. The fire cracked and hissed, throwing weak light over the alien mother's face. She breathed, but each breath sounded like a struggle. The human's eyes stayed fixed on her chest, counting every rise and fall, willing it not to stop. The child clung tightly to her, their small head resting on her shoulder. Their tears had dried, but their eyes stayed open, too afraid to sleep. "She's still cold," they whispered, their voice small and full of fear. "She's not better yet." The human nodded, exhaustion pressing on his body like a mountain. His hands were cracked, his cloak torn, his own chest burned with every breath, but his resolve only grew heavier. He looked at the mother's trembling form, and then at the child. He knew the truth. If they stayed here, they would not last. The firewood was nearly gone. The walls groaned as snow pushed harder against them. This shelter would soon collapse, and then the storm would win. "We can't remain here," he said at last, his voice rough but steady. "If she stays in this ruin, she will die. We need stronger fire, real shelter, people. We must go back to the village." This child's eyes widened, fear mixing with disbelief. "But you can't carry her. She's too heavy. And the storm, it will kill us." The human crouched lower, meeting the child's gaze. "It will kill us if we stay," he said firmly. "But if I carry her, there is a chance. I will not let her be left here in the ice." He turned to the mother, whose eyes fluttered weakly open at his words. She looked at him, confusion and sorrow flickering across her face, as if she could not believe anyone would bear such a burden for her. Her lips parted, whispering faintly, "Leave me. Save my child." The human shook his head, his jaw set. "I will save you both," he said. "I don't leave lives behind." Slowly, he shifted closer, sliding his arms beneath her body. Her weight pressed against him, heavy and stiff from the ice. His muscles screamed as he lifted her, but he rose, pulling her against his back, securing her with the last strips of cloth he had. The child looked at him with wide, terrified eyes. "You'll break." "You can't." But he forced a grin through the pain. "I've carried worse than this," he lied. His knees trembled under her weight, yet he stood tall. "Stay close to me," he told the child. "Hold my belt. Don't let go. Whatever happens, stay behind me." The child nodded, wiping their face with a trembling hand. They grabbed hold of his belt as he pushed the door open, and once again the storm swallowed them. The cold slammed against him instantly, burning his skin. His legs shook under the mother's weight, every step sinking deep into the snow. But he pushed forward, leaning into the wind. Each breath he took was like fire in his chest, but he did not stop. The child stumbled behind him, clutching his belt tightly. Their cries were lost in the storm, but their presence gave him strength. He would not fail them, not now. Step after step, the snow tried to drag him down. The mother's weight felt like stone on his back. Her head rested against his shoulder, her faint breath warm against his neck. He whispered to himself with every step. "One more step, one more step. Keep moving." He fell once, crashing into the snow. The child screamed, tugging at his cloak. He forced himself back up, teeth gritted, sweat freezing on his skin. His body wanted to collapse, but his spirit refused. The lights of the village were far in the distance, faint glimmers against the storm. He fixed his eyes on them. Every step was agony, but every step was closer to life. Behind him, the trail of his struggle was marked in the snow. His deep prints, the child's smaller ones, and the faint drag of the mother's frozen limbs. A trail of impossible defiance carved against death itself. The storm roared louder, but the human's resolve roared louder still. He carried the impossible weight, not just of the mother's body, but of two lives, of hope, of a promise he refused to break. And step by step, he moved through the storm, a single man against the fury of the world. The storm clawed at them with frozen fingers, howling like a predator hunting its prey. The human's body bent under the weight of the alien mother tied to his back. But he kept walking. Each step felt like he was climbing a mountain of ice. The child stumbled behind him, clutching his belt with trembling hands, whispering through chattering teeth, "Please, just a little more, please." His muscles screamed, his chest burned, his vision blurred. He wanted to fall, to collapse into the snow and let the storm bury him. But then the child's voice reached him again, soft and desperate. "Don't stop. She needs us." and those words lit a fire inside his frozen body. At last, the village lights shimmered faintly in the distance, weak lanterns swaying against the storm. Hope rose in his chest, but so did fear. He knew the people here. They were cautious. They shut their doors to strangers and to aliens even more. Would they help, or would they turn their faces away as they had when the child first cried in the storm? His legs trembled as he reached the village gates, snow crunching loudly under his boots. The child ran ahead, pounding on the nearest door. "Please, please, help us," they screamed. Their little fists struck against the wood, but the only answer was silence. Curtains shifted, shadows moved, but no one came out. The human staggered to the center of the street, his voice booming through the storm. "Open your doors! She is dying!" He almost collapsed as the mother groaned weakly on his back, her breath hot against his neck, fading fast. One door cracked open, just enough for a face to peek out. A villager's eyes widened at the sight of the alien mother and child. They shook their head quickly. "Leave. We cannot take her in. She will bring misfortune." Then the door slammed shut. The child gasped, tears freezing on their cheeks. Why won't they help? Why? Their cry pierced the night louder than the storm. Fear began to coil inside the human's chest. Not fear of the storm, but fear of what cold hearts could do. He dropped to one knee, lowering the mother onto the ground for a moment. He looked around, his eyes burning with fire, even as his body shook. "If they will not give us shelter," he growled, "then I will make one." He dragged the mother and child toward an old storage hall at the edge of the village. Its door was rotting, but it was large enough to shield them from the wind. He kicked it open with the last of his strength, carrying them inside. The hall was cold, filled with dust and broken tools, but it had walls and a roof. That was enough. He lowered the mother onto a pile of old sacks. Her lips were blue, her skin pale as frost. The child collapsed beside her, clinging to her arm. "She's so cold. Please don't let her go." The human's heart pounded with both fear and determination. He tore apart wooden crate with his bare hands, ignoring the splinters cutting his skin. He stacked them, struck flint, and after what felt like forever, fire leapt to life. The flames spread across the wood, casting warm light across their faces. The child's wide eyes glimmered with hope as the fire grew stronger, but fear still lingered. They whispered, "Is it enough? Will it save her?" The human crouched by the mother, pressing his fingers to her neck. Her pulse was weak but still there. He breathed out slowly. "It will give her a chance, and as long as there is a chance, we will not stop." He pulled off his last inner layer, wrapping it tightly around her shoulders. His skin stung from the cold, but he refused to keep the warmth for himself. He fed the fire again, watching the light spread across her face. The child leaned against him, their body trembling. "Why are you doing this? No one else would. Why you?" The human's eyes stayed on the fire, shadows dancing across his tired face. "Because no one should die in the cold while others sit by their fires," he said simply. His words carried no pride, only truth. The storm battered the walls, but inside, the fire crackled strong. Fear still lived in their hearts, fear that she might slip away before dawn, but the human's presence burned brighter than that fear. And in that fragile hall, warmth returned, not just to their bodies but to their hearts. For the first time, the child believed their mother might survive. And for the first time, the mother's lips moved, whispering faintly, "Thank you." The human closed his eyes, listening to the fire's crackle and the storm's roar. He knew the battle was not yet won, but tonight, he had carved a small victory against the endless cold. The fire burned brighter inside the abandoned storage hall, but its warmth felt fragile, as if one strong gust of wind could snuff it out. The human sat near the flames, his body shaking from exhaustion. His hands were raw, his face pale, but his eyes stayed locked on the alien mother. She lay on the roughs, axe wrapped in his torn clothes, her chest rising and falling with painful slowness. The child crouched beside her, clutching her frozen hand. Their eyes never left her face. "She's still not waking," they whispered, their voice trembling. "She's still so cold." Tears clung to their lashes, threatening to fall. The human leaned closer, pressing his fingers against the mother's neck. The pulse was weak, but there, Faint as a whisper in the storm, relief stirred in his chest, but it was not enough. He needed more than a faint heartbeat. He needed to see her breathe, to hear her voice again. He turned to the child. "Help me. We need to keep her warm. Hold her hand tighter. Don't let her drift away." The child nodded, their small fingers wrapping more firmly around their mother's hand, whispering softly as though words could anchor her spirit. The human tore apart another crate, feeding the fire until it roared higher. The light flickered against the cracked walls, shadows stretching like ghosts. He crouched down again, pulling the mother's body slightly closer to the flames. Her skin was icy, her lips almost blue. But then, for the briefest second, he saw her chest rise a little deeper than before. "Come on," he whispered, his voice harsh but pleading. "Breathe. Don't let the storm take you." The child leaned close to their mother's face, tears spilling. "Please, please don't leave me. I need you." The hall was silent except for the storm outside and the crackle of the fire. And then suddenly a soft sound filled the silence. The mother drew in a deeper breath, shaky but stronger than before. Her body shuddered, and her eyes fluttered half open, dim light catching in them. "Mother," the child cried, their voice breaking. They threw their arms around her, sobbing with joy. "You're alive!" The human let out a long, heavy breath, his body sagging with relief. He had carried her weight, fought the storm, fed the fire with his own strength, and now, finally, life had answered. The mother's lips trembled, words escaping slowly. "Cold, storm, I thought." Her eyes moved to the child who clung tightly to her. "You're safe." And then weakly her gaze shifted to the human, confusion and disbelief in her tired eyes. "You saved us." He shook his head, his voice steady though his throat was dry. "No, you saved yourself. You kept breathing. You held on." The child looked up at him, shaking their head fiercely. "No, you saved her. If you hadn't come, if you hadn't carried her, she would have..." They couldn't finish. They only pressed their face against their mother's chest, sobbing. The mother's hand trembled as she lifted it, placing it gently on the child's head. Her voice cracked but held warmth. "Hush, I'm here now. I won't leave you." For the first time since the storm began, a fragile peace filled the hall. The fire glowed bright, the child clung to their mother, and the human sat close, silent, watching as hope bloomed. But even in that moment of relief, fear lingered. He looked at the door, the walls, the faint shadows of villagers moving outside. He knew they were still not safe. The storm would pass, but the people's coldness was another kind of danger. Still, for now, he let the moment rest. The mother had drawn breath again, the child had found hope again, and his promise had not been broken. The human leaned back against the wall, eyes heavy, but his heart lighter than it had been. The storm outside howled on, but in this small hall, life had triumphed over death. And in the glow of the fire, the alien mother whispered one final word before sleep pulled her under, soft but clear. "Thank you." The child looked at the human, eyes shining with both gratitude and awe, and he only nodded, his voice a low murmur. "We're not done yet, but tonight, we've won." Dawn broke slow and pale, the storm finally easing after a night of endless fury. The storage hall was filled with the faint orange glow of dying embers. The human sat slumped against the wall, his eyes heavy but alert. The alien child was curled beside their mother, their small hand locked tightly in hers. Both were asleep, both breathing, fragile but alive. The human let out a quiet breath, relief settling in his chest like a weight finally lifted. But he knew the fight was not yet over. Survival against the storm was only the first battle. The next would be harder, facing the judgment of the village. When the mother stirred, her eyes opening slowly, he helped her sit up. Her body was weak, her movements trembling, but there was a spark of life in her that had not been there before. The child woke at once, clinging to her, whispering, "I thought I lost you." She kissed their forehead with trembling lips, then looked at the human with something between wonder and disbelief. "You carried me through death itself," she whispered. "Why?" He didn't answer right away. He looked toward the cracked door where the storm had left silence. "Because leaving you to die would have been the same as killing you," he said at last. "And I don't do that." The moment of peace didn't last long. The sound of footsteps approached outside, whispers rising. Shadows shifted as villagers gathered, drawn by curiosity. Their voices were sharp and doubtful. Why is he here? He brought them into the village? That woman, she's not one of us. She'll bring sickness, misfortune. And he risked his life for them? Foolish. The door creaked open, and several villagers stepped inside, wrapped in furs. Their eyes went first to the alien mother and child, then to the human crouched protectively beside them. Their gazes were cold, their lips thin with disapproval. One older man stepped forward, his face lined with suspicion. You brought them here? In the middle of a room? He shook his head. You should have left them. The storm chooses who survives. The child pressed closer to their mother, fear in their eyes. The mother lowered her gaze, shame flickering across her face, as though she expected to be cast out once more. The human stood, his tired body straightening like iron. His eyes burned with fire as he faced the villagers. You would have left a child to die in the snow, and a mother chained in ice. You closed your doors, and I opened mine, and you dare to judge me? Murmurs rose, the villagers uneasy at his defiance. Some scowled, others looked away, guilt shadowing their faces. The old man spat on the floor. This is not your world, human. You do not decide for us. Their kind is trouble. They do not belong here. The human stepped closer, his voice low but powerful, each word striking harder than the storm outside. Life belongs everywhere. The storm does not ask who is worthy. Death does not care who belongs. Only cowards hide behind doors while innocents freeze. The silence that followed was sharp. The villagers shifted uneasily. Some still glared, but others stared at the mother and child, saw the way the child clung desperately, saw the weakness in the mother's trembling form, and something inside them cracked. A younger villager finally stepped forward, her eyes softer. He's right, she said quietly. We heard the child crying last night, and we closed our doors. But he went into the storm. He carried her back. He lit fire where we offered nothing. More whispers rose, this time filled with doubt toward themselves. The old man tried to silence them, but the words had already spread. The child, their voice small but strong, looked up at the villagers. He saved us when no one else would. Does that make him a fool, or the only one with a heart? The hall grew silent again, and shame fell heavy on the crowd. No one had an answer, not even the old man. The human turned back to the mother and child, kneeling beside them again, his voice soft but firm. You're safe here now. I won't let anyone push you back into the cold. The villagers left in silence, some with anger, others with guilt. But the seed had been planted. They had seen what he had done, and they could not forget it. The storm outside had ended, but the storm inside the hearts of the people was only beginning. And in the middle of it, one human, one child, and one mother stood together, defying both ice and judgment. The village was quiet when the crowd dispersed, but the silence was heavy, not peaceful. Whispers still lingered in the cold air, carried from door to door. Some villagers spoke with scorn, others with guilt, but all of them carried the same truth. They had seen a human walk into a storm when none of them dared. They had seen him carry back life from death. Inside the abandoned hall, the fire burned low, glowing red like a heartbeat. The alien mother leaned weakly against the wall, her breath slow but steady. The child sat curled against her, their head resting on her lap, their small body finally relaxing after endless fear. The human sat a short distance away, his back against the cracked wall. His eyes were heavy with exhaustion, but he remained alert. His body ached as if made of stone, and yet he felt lighter than he had in years. He had kept his promise. He had carried them through the storm. The mother's voice broke the silence, soft but clear. I don't understand you, she said, her alien eyes reflecting the dying firelight. You could have left us. You had no duty, no bond to us, and yet you carried me when even my own people turned away. Why? The human raised his eyes slowly. His voice was rough but steady. Because no child should lose their mother to the cold. Because no life deserves to be abandoned. He looked at the child who was sleeping soundly now, and because when I heard their cry, I knew, if I did nothing, I'd carry that sound in my heart forever. Her lips trembled, her gaze dropping to her child. She touched their cheek gently, and for the first time a small smile touched her frozen features. You gave back what I thought was already taken. My child still has me because of you." She looked back at him, her voice soft but full of weight. "You are not just human tonight. You are hope." The words struck him deeply. Though he said nothing, his hand simply tightened around the hilt of his belt, grounding himself against the flood of emotions he rarely allowed. Hours passed, the storm outside fading into a still, icy dawn. The sun rose pale and weak, but its light pierced through cracks in the wall. A new day had come, one not ruled by the storm. The villagers gathered again, this time not to judge, but to watch. They saw the mother, alive though fragile, the child clinging to her, and the humans silent but strong beside them. Some whispered in shame, others in awe, and slowly a few began to step forward, not with stones or curses, but with small offerings. One woman placed a bundle of firewood at the door. Another man left bread and a skin of water. A younger villager laid down blankets, their eyes avoiding the humans but filled with silent respect. The old man who had cursed them the night before did not come, but even his voice had grown quiet. The storm of judgment had softened, replaced by reluctant acceptance. The child woke and saw the gifts, their eyes wide with wonder. "They helped us," they whispered. Their mother pulled them close, tears gathering in her eyes. "They helped because of him," she said softly, looking at the human. He stood slowly, his body stiff. He looked at the villagers, then back at the mother and child. "I don't need their thanks," he said simply. "I only need to know you will live." The child ran to him suddenly, throwing their small arms around his waist. "We will," they whispered, paired, their voice full of certainty. "Because you came for us, because you didn't let go." The human froze for a moment, then placed a hand gently on the child's head. His voice was low but steady. "Then that is enough." The mother's eyes filled with warmth, her voice trembling but clear. "In the coldest storm, you gave us warmth, not just fire, not just life, but something greater. You gave us a reason to believe again." The villagers watched in silence, some ashamed, some moved, but none could deny what they saw. One human had faced the storm, carried the impossible, and given back life where there had been only death. As the sun climbed higher, melting the edges of ice, the human stepped outside, his cloak torn, his body scarred, but his spirit unbroken. Behind him, the mother and child leaned on one another, alive, safe, and no longer alone. The storm had taken many things that night, but it could not take this. It could not take the warmth born in the heart of a human who refused to let go. And so, where once there had only been ice and fear, now there was light, fire, and a bond strong enough to defy even the coldest storm.